This Week in Radio Tech, episode 299, is brought to you by the Axia Soft Surface Virtual Console software for Windows, real-time control of your Axia Fusion or Element. By Zipstream X2, professional streaming software. Stream like you mean it with Zipstream. And by Lavo and the Crystal Clear Virtual Radio Console. Crystal Clear is the console with a multi-touch touchscreen interface. At the end of day one of the Public Radio Engineering Conference, Chris and Kirk get a chance to talk radio engineering. Poolside. We're dishing on some radio news stories like Broadcast Electronics getting a new owner, and he's an engineer. The NAB Radio Show will be held in Austin, Texas next year, and the full NAB show starts on Monday. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Delighted to be here. I mean, who wouldn't be? Chris Tobin, you're here. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you in person.
Nice. We're at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino and Resort here in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're getting ready for the big NAB show, but we've had some other things to attend to before the NAB show starts. And by the way, this is the show, This Week in Radio Tech, where we talk about radio broadcast technology, audio. We talk about RF transmission, antennas, towers, microphones, and now streaming and getting into video from time to time, too, like we are today. So many radio stations now are getting into video and snippets and live streaming themselves. So that's the kind of stuff that we talk about. Our show is brought to you by the folks at Axia, also by the folks at Zipstream, and by the folks at Lavo. We very much appreciate all their help. Hey, if you hear a little music going on, it's because we're sitting under a speaker here by the pool at the Tuscany Hotel and Resort. Chris, as we start every show, Chris Tobin here, my colleague, the best dressed engineer in radio. And today, hey, it's almost the Bobsey twins here as far as the dress is concerned.
Oh, yes.
I need a yellow tie.
Well, it's good contrast. Thank goodness.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That way
I had a choice. Actually, I was thinking of a blue tie today.
Tell us apart. You usually ask for a weather report, Chris.
Well, I can tell you the sun is out. The palm trees look very robust. There's a few coconuts hanging, and things are good.
It's a nice resort.
It's a very nice resort. Just behind this greenery that we have here is the pool.
Yeah.
Well, just behind this bag.
Yeah. Well, we had to cover up some stuff at the pool.
Right.
It's a family show.
Well, for some, yes. But the waitress didn't seem to be too concerned with the family show.
If she asks for a drink order, well, I guess we can both pause the show for a second and give a drink order.
Absolutely.
I just need some ginger ale. What I don't need is Lake Mead water.
No, that's quite all right.
That comes out of the tap at the hotel.
Yes.
So Chris and I are both here at the Tuscany for a very specific reason. When you have the NAB show, what happens is other organizations decide, hey, we'll have our convention, our conferences, our meetings right either during or before or perhaps just after the NAB show. Now, after the NAB show, nobody wants to leave or go on vacation.
Thursday out.
Yeah. The airport is a zoo on Thursday. But before the NAB show start is a good time to have conventions. And so we've been at the Public Radio Engineering Conference, the PREC, or as you call it,
PREC.
PREC.
Those in the know, it's PREC.
I'd never get used to that.
Oh, yes.
And the PREC is put on by the Association of Public Radio Engineers. You go in that, there you go, apre.us. APRE.us is, if you're a public radio engineer and you're not a member of this, you ought to check it out. They have a fantastic support system, and the conference that they put on despite the fact that I spoke at it, is fantastic. It's one fantastic speaker after another talking about technologies that are new, up to date, very instructive.
Yes, very.
And in fact, we had from last year, Steve Johnston spoke. He's the director of engineering for Wisconsin Public Radio, and he spoke about metadata and massaging that and getting it out in the right formats to different services. He was here today, and so anyway, if you're a public radio engineer, check this thing out. It's well worth your while and important for your career to be here and take care of all this learning. Who's speaking right now?
Let's see, what time is it? It's 2 o'clock.
Jeff?
It's Corey Edwards from Dielectric talking about improving FM combiner efficiency and non-conventional coupling.
And you know what? Since so many stations now are having to combine tower sites. Land values sometimes go up a lot at a tower site maybe you've been at for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to move site. Combining becomes very important. But just before him, Jeff Welton was talking.
Jeff Welton from Nautel talking about transmitter site grounding, which we all know is very important.
Yeah.
And he has some good pictures. I've seen his presentation. It's very good.
By the way, you've probably read it. Nautel literally wrote the book on transmitter side grounding.
Yes.
The back of every manual they ship out. And you can download it from Nautel's site. Fantastic booklet on transmitter side grounding.
And the nice thing is, if you're here at PREC, you can talk to someone like Jeff afterwards to get more detailed questions that you wouldn't get out of a book, or maybe on the phone because they may not have time.
Yeah.
So another reason why you should attend these shows. Get to talk to people offline, and there's some good stuff.
So we're going to continue on with some other topics. We have a Today in Radio History, which there's an item in there that is just fantastic. You're not going to believe, well, you will believe it, but it's amazing that it happened. We got some topical news coming up and some news of the upcoming NAB show. Big change of hands for an important broadcast equipment company. Yeah. That's coming up. And more stuff to talk about. That's all coming up here on our show. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Axia. And Axia, of course, they make a selection of audio control surfaces, right? We know them as consoles, but the current buzzword would be surfaces because they're controlling an audio mixer that's elsewhere on the network. But check this out. Axia also makes a software mixer. Well, it's a controller that controls a hardware engine, and that's called the Soft Surface. Check it out on the Axia website. You can go to telosalliance.com and click on Axia there from the Axia website. telosalliance.com and then click Axia. Look for Soft Surface, and it runs in a Windows environment. So you can run this on so many different devices. We're showing it there on a tablet or on a desktop computer that's got the piece, the computer actually built in the back of it. But you could run this on a Windows tablet. You could run this on a Windows phone. You could. I hear there's going to be a new push for Windows phones at some point. And then you can run it at home, in a studio down the hall, at a remote broadcast site. You can run it from almost any location. Give proper remote access, password protected, into your Axia mix engine back at your radio station, and take control from this app, the Soft Surface app. I think it can do almost anything that the Hard Surface can do. It doesn't have its own inputs and outputs, of course. It's an app to run the Surface. But you can create mix minuses. It does that automatically. You can assign things to buses. You can, of course, run your monitor volume up and down. Almost everything you do with the regular app, you can do that. You can change profiles. You can change sources on a fader. And since you can only see about 8 faders on the app at one time, you can really easily page between groups of 8 faders. You can get to anything, pop, and you're running it up and down, even if you've got a very large console back at the station, or you just need to control a whole lot of stuff. And Soft Surface works with or without the audio console. You don't have to have a hardware console. Now, what that means is that, let's say that you want to outfit a number of production workstations, and all you're doing is dubbing, and occasionally, making a few routing changes and fixing a volume level here and there. Well, hey, you don't really need to pay for a hardware surface. Buy the Soft Surface from Axia, run it on a PC that can be doing other stuff too, and control a mixing engine that way. So it's really flexible and a very cool thing. A lot of stations have implemented this as either a secondary thing or in their production rooms or in their news suites. The Axia Soft Surface. Contact your nearest dealer or talk to one of Axia's 2 factory reps in the U.S., John Bissett or Jim Armstrong, or talk to our sales manager, Cam Eicher. A lot of great ideas there. If you're out here at NAB, come by the Telos booth in the North Hall and say hi to us and ask to look at the Soft Surface. Thanks a lot to Axia for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All righty. I was looking back at this day in history, right?
This day in history.
Look at this from 1961. What happened?
Oh, wow. 2 channels of FM came as standard. Stereo. FM stereo standard is authorized.
FCC authorized. Now, before April 20th of 1961, by the way, I'll bet that was either, wait a minute, that's not actually today. That's coming up in 6 days. I'll bet they did that during an NAB show.
Probably.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
They announced authorization of FM stereo. Chris, I got to go to one of these programs in New York that is concurrent with AES that David Bialik puts together.
Yes.
And this one was on the anniversary of FM stereo.
Okay.
So this would have been,
I
forget which anniversary it was. It may have been the 20, no, it would have been, I don't know, whatever anniversary it was.
Yes.
Dick Burden was there.
Oh, he had
Bob
a whole lineup.
Warban,
Yeah.
Frank Foti, and lots of other engineers. I'm sorry I'm not remembering their names. And the presentation showed all these audio standards that have come and gone, right? Reel-to-reel tapes and cassette tapes and digital cassettes and mini discs, and I guess CDs are still with us, but falling by the wayside, right? Albums, of course, vinyl,
absolutely,
and the stereo that had been around, the standard that had been around. Working on it years before this, improving it out, testing it. Yeah. I wonder if to broadcast in stereo you had to have some kind of a temporary permit.
Probably did, because it's a subcarrier on your main carrier. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some paperwork involved back in 1961. It was all about proper filings and making sure everything was buttoned up.
I got to believe that. Imagine being a radio station in a smaller medium market, okay? And you have an FM license, and you built the transmitter, but you're pretty sure nobody's listening to it. Right. This is back in the mid '60s, right?
Yes.
And you're making the decision: do we spend the money on FM stereo, or do we give away another car on the AM station?
Right.
And that would have been a tough decision.
I would think it would be a tough decision, but also put it in perspective or context of the time period. 1961, AM was doing its thing, but how many technologies were available to the average listener, right? And now you have an opportunity to expand and find a way to generate more money by going somewhere else with something new.
Yeah.
All you had was television,
right?
And that was still in its, which was going on its merry way. And then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, we got this FM thing that could actually do more.
Right.
And you can hear the difference. So you could hear it and say, what? We can do this? I would bet in 1961 more business people were inclined to find a way to spend the money, where today, if you had a similar situation, they would say no.
Well, I was going to make a parallel comparison with HD.
Yeah, I was going to say HD radio, but I didn't want to say HD. But I just had this conversation the other day with a person. We were talking about architecture, and she was so upset that a building in her neighborhood where she works, they were tearing it down, and it was built in like 1905 and had a lot of history to it. And she was upset that the people that bought it, they weren't interested in what the history of it was. And she's like, but this downtown district is the way it is because of that history. Why can't you just keep the facade and build the inside with the condos?
Okay, yeah.
And I said to her, well, that's why you have the landmark commissions in a lot of cities. Like in New York City, that's why Grand Central Terminal is still around. If it wasn't for the landmark commission that was started, or the whole force of it by Mrs. Kennedy, you wouldn't have Grand Central Terminal because they were looking to put a building there. New York, Pennsylvania Station, Penn Plaza as it's known, is no longer what Penn Plaza was. It's now a bunch of office buildings that got torn down.
Right.
But that too, if you look at pictures, that was a majestic structure. But it all comes down to, well, that's nice, but nobody wants it. Well, so you say. But if you start to lose your history and understanding where you came from, how do you know where you're going to go?
So back to the FM stereo, part of the equation had to be, well, there aren't any receivers out there. Or you get a receiver and you slap it under your dash, and it puts out a signal on your AM radio. Right. So you don't get any of the quality benefits that you should have with FM.
Right, but remember the context of the period.
Yeah.
Okay, there may not be any receivers, but you know what? If I'm on the air with it, if I'm doing it, I'm going to go out and promote it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to push it, and I'm going to push those receivers and make sure we can get them.
So I would say that the attitude you're describing is the attitude that any entrepreneur would have.
Right.
But there are plenty of stations, both then and now, and in all the years intervening, where, hey, we're fat and happy, we're doing fine. Why would I spend the money on this technology that nobody's got a radio for, or very few out there yet? And hey, I have enough problem getting enough people to run my AM station, on a Sunday morning.
Right.
How am I going to run the FM station as well? I'm just coming at it from the other side, because I know that there are people who got a license, turned it in later, weren't making money, or they got a license and they sold it for a paltry sum.
Right.
Because it was, and of course the entrepreneur picked it up for the paltry sum.
Exactly.
And went and made something with it. When I was a kid, probably about 10 years old, in the Wichita, Kansas area, AM was king, right? But there was an FM station, a little upstart, that was playing rock and roll music, and some top 40 too, and they were playing like American Top 40, and so that was the cool station to listen to. In fact, I just remember the call letters. It was KLEO. And I'm not even sure what town. It was licensed to some podunk little town outside of Wichita, but that was the cool station to listen to, KLEO.
Right. And in the New York City metropolitan area, the cool stations back in the day when I was growing up, the rock and roll stations they were, and they were legacy stations. You had WNEW-FM in New York.
Yeah.
Right? Now, their competitor at the time, rock and roll, was WPLJ,
Right.
or actually ABC-FM, but they went pop music in that direction, so WNEW stayed rock and roll. Then you had WDHA in Dover, New Jersey, across the river.
Oh.
Another legacy station that introduced doing stereo miking.
Oh, my goodness.
They used stereo mics in
Yeah,
the air studio.
Yeah.
And then on Long Island, you had WBAB-FM. So, these are stations that knew what they wanted, and they went after it and didn't do all the metrics we do today and the analytics to decide whether or not we should press the button and go or not. And I think that's part of the difference. 1961, 1985, businesses were doing business. They were in the business of reaching the listener. Today, broadcasters are in the business of broadcaster. And that's why it's not going where you should. That's why a lot of business owners, a lot of radio owners, I've met many, you are one, and a lot of them will not take the leap of faith because we are so risk averse to trying anything because we're no longer willing to just say, okay, I failed at it, we'll move on and make it happen.
Yeah.
Because all the other elements around us won't do it. I worked for a broadcast company in 1984, family-owned operation. They had several other businesses under their umbrella, but broadcast was the crown jewel for the family because it reached the community. That's what they were about. And we did things back in 1983, 84, all the way up to where it would cost us a gut reaction to make it happen. Program director came to the general manager and said, I have this idea to do a broadcast from a boat on Long Island Sound. He's like, really? It's the Mayor's Cup race.
This is in the early 80s.
Early 80s. And the GM is like, well, okay, but we don't have the equipment. Well, no, I talked to the engineer. That was me. We can do it if we could just get a few things in place. He goes, how much? And I forget what the cost was. So then he sits there, and the GM says, all right, so what do you think we could get out of this? Goes to the sales department. Do you think we could do something? And the sales department was like, we have access to the Mayor's Cup race? And the GM goes, yeah, we got an in. The news director's got us in, and they're going to put us on the mayor's yacht. It's a yacht race on Long Island Sound. Okay, it's Connecticut and Long Island. Hello. So the sales manager's like, yeah, we could do it. We're good. General manager said, whatever it costs, just do it. Now, take that same scenario, and I've been in it.
Okay.
Fast forward to, say, the late 90s, and I guarantee you will not get the same reaction, no matter what anybody says, because no one's willing to say, yeah, I think I get that. And that's where the innovative thinkers have gone away. And I say this because television is going through a very big change. And if you don't think it is, the next time you get your Verizon bill, notice the video products they're now offering.
Oh, yeah.
Did I say it was Verizon? I didn't say that was ABC, did I?
Right.
No.
Right.
And also don't forget, Comcast is introducing a lot of new things that, wait a minute, they're a cable company. Oh, they also provide data.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, but they're also providing streaming programming now. So these are things that are happening and nobody's paying attention to. And that's why we're now scurrying. And radio is going to be impacted because of the repack. Remember the television auction?
Yep.
Repacking is going to change things. That means your tower sites may come or go, or you may find out that you may have to move your antenna on your tower because you're in the way of
TV.
Yeah.
Changes are nothing constant except change.
Yes.
You don't know of too many radio stations where the owner is an engineer, do you?
No.
There are some.
There are some, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met them, folks like that.
Yeah.
And some of them have been very, very successful. They're willing to take chances. And they understand.
I don't know if you know a friend of mine, Chris Karb. Chris,
I know the name.
Chris is an engineer. He worked for years, well, in several markets, but in the Memphis market is where I met him. And Chris Karb was famous for having gone through the WLAC AM directional system and simplifying it greatly.
Nice.
So it had a lot fewer components in it, met all the proper specs, and wide banded it. I mean, it made it sound a lot better. Chris Karb then went on to work for Harris, and now he's running some radio stations, last time I checked, in Asheville, North Carolina.
Very nice.
Anyway, great engineer, fabulous guy. And I bring that up, though. Well, Kirk, why did you bring this up? Because an engineer is the new owner of Broadcast Electronics, the equipment manufacturer.
That's right.
So here's the story out of Radio Magazine Online. Broadcast Electronics, fully owned by IIC Acquisitions, and that company is headed by BE Vice President of RF Engineering, Brian Lindemann. So there's an article about that at radiomagonline.com. And I'm hoping that Brian, you'd think he'd be at the NAB show. I hope we get to meet him. maybe do a quick little interview with them too.
That would be great.
I have seen BE go through periods of great success and glory and periods of not quite as much success and glory.
Yes.
And it's always great to have competitors, people vying for the best positions in the market, people having the best ideas.
Absolutely.
So, Nautel and Harris are out there. There's some Italian manufacturers, and I'd like to see BE be strong.
Well, BE over the years, and I can't quote it because I don't remember offhand, but BE managed over the years to always come up with very, how would you say, very clever ways of using technology in the broadcast environment, and they did a lot of things under the hood, I'll call it, in their transmitters.
Oh yeah,
the MVDS box, which many of you out there may go, what? Oh yeah, I remember that. The FM30s, the FM25s, the blue box with the TV screen in it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. In the beginning, a lot. I mean, I had 2 of them, 30 kilowatts, and yes, the design was able for a computer monitor system and a CPU in a box with RF without any RF chokes is definitely something you don't want to do. But we learn these things as you go along. The fact that they thought of that and they looked at that and said, wait a minute, this is what we can be doing. Think of how early that was and how many other people were doing that. Nobody.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So BE, over the years, yes, they've had their up and downs, but they've had some very talented and very open thinking approach to stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing them get back to that, I'll call it glory. And if the engineering team is at the helm and with the business savvy that they have in order to pull this off, I could see a lot of things happening in the next, I give them probably 18 months to get organized, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, hopefully we'll talk to Brian and see what's in store. Okay, so in the news also is the NAB Radio Show. That's the show like this one, but minus everything but radio. It's just radio. Last year it was in Atlanta. This year, 2016, it's in my town. It's in Nashville.
Oh,
yeah.
I know where I'll be.
Yeah, and by the way, almost concurrent with that, I think just before the radio show in Nashville will be the International Radio Festival. Now, I've never heard of anything like this in the U.S. before. It's a big deal in Europe, and we don't do this here. So hopefully the Europeans will bring us some very cool. Here's what they do. It is like big time. Put your big girl pants on, show and tell for radio shows. So what they do, they pick a venue, and in Nashville, they've already picked a venue. The place is called Acme Feed and Seed.
But Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a fantastic venue. They picked the right place. So we're going to build a temporary radio studio there, and broadcasters from literally all over the world are going to come in there, and they're going to be doing their normal shows from there. And other broadcasters watch. The public's invited to most, if not all, the events to watch and listen and applaud when necessary. But these people, and now some of these come in and do the show again. The International Radio Festival. By the way, it's going on right now in Milan.
Oh wow!
They do like 2 of these a year. There was 1 a year. Now they're doing 2. Milan's right now. Nashville will be later this year, just before NAB Radio, and. Some of the talent that's there has regular listening audiences in the tens of millions.
Wow!
You're the most popular DJ in India. What do you think your audience is?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
It's amazing. So, the people from Singapore, from China, just all over. Going to be really cool. So yeah, I'm looking at the concept. There's so much excitement about radio, and sometimes. I don't know, and sometimes in the U.S. I feel like there's a lack of excitement in a lot of areas of radio.
Yes, that's true.
But internationally, I'm telling you, radio is still really hot.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Good. So, the radio show for 2017. It's been just announced that's going to be in
Austin, Texas. Barbecue time.
So Austin and Nashville are in many ways very similar cities.
Yes.
Very artsy.
All about the music, arts. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of barbecue places.
Oh, yeah.
Except Nashville, it's pork barbecue.
Right.
In Austin, it's beef barbecue.
It's beef, and it's also different type of sauce approach, right? Is Memphis or Nashville, that area, is that the vinegar type? Vinegar based?
There is some of that, yeah.
Is in Nashville more of a little bit of everything?
Well, it's a little bit of everything,
okay.
Yeah. You go to North Carolina, and it's the mustard based sauces.
That, yeah.
And
there's one with hickory, or no? Is that right? Hickory?
The couple of the popular like fast food barbecue places, they're locally owned. In Nashville, it's Whit's Barbecue.
Ooh.
They have a number of locations that are just real quick. You get a sandwich for $5-6 or so, or a whole platter for $8. And in Memphis, it's Tops Barbecue.
Oh.
So Whit's in Nashville, Tops in Memphis,
Oh.
and both of them, their standard sauce is a little thinner.
Yes.
Kind of a vinegary sauce.
That's what I'm thinking. The thinner to the thicker. Yes.
Yeah.
With molasses and something others. Okay.
Well, good deal.
So we're talking about this now so you can get prepared for later in September.
Yeah,
So you know what you're going to be eating, where you're going, what you're doing, and then for the next year.
Plan your tickets to Nashville for this fall in September, and plan your tickets for Austin, Texas for next fall, 2017. Okay. So here's a little more, processing audio in a PC, it's just more and more popular. Orban is announcing a new PCIe card, and it's the Optimod PC 5501E. So it's an FM audio processor designed for Windows computers. So
I think what it does is it takes the heavy lifting off of the CPU.
The CPU, yeah.
And puts it on the card.
Yeah.
Which is not, if those of you back in the day will remember the Antex brand of sound cards.
Yeah.
They did the same thing on their high end, and I believe Digigram as well in the early days. They put it on the card because the CPUs at the time.
It's interesting where this is going, because right now, I mean, I'm in the Telos Omnia Axia world. That's my employer, and so both Leif Clayson and Hans von Zutphen have, separate from Telos, they have software products that give you an FM processor on a PC.
Right.
And an ordinary sound card will give you audio in, audio out, and that works okay. But if you just do that, you need a stereo generator separately, right?
Right.
And a lot of FM exciters have a stereo generator in them. So you can even get an AES card, go out AES, it's clipped, it's limited, it's pre-emphasized, and go into an FM exciter. But if you get a high-end audio card, or one of these external boxes that does 192 kilohertz sampling,
Yes.
which is a standard, then you can have this software and that box or card put out MPX, put out multiplex, baseband.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, computer-based virtualization has reached a point now where you can actually do it reliably and safely in the broadcast environment.
I wanted to mention the Orban product because doing it all on a card and offloading is still a very valid technology, and it's a convenient way to get you the inputs and outputs that you might expect and need, like AES and analog are built right onto it. And so I believe so is multiplex, and it's got SCA inputs as well. So if you want to loop your subcarrier through that and add that to the MPX, you can do that too. So lots of possibilities there. What else is new? Oh, the broad, we talked about the PREC, the PREC, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The PREC, what time is it? Okay, we're good. The PREC going on before NAB, but there's another conference that goes on. We think of it as being part of NAB, and I guess it is, but it's the Broadcast Engineering Conference.
Yeah, the BEC, yeah.
What do you know about the BEC, at least years past, or what's for this year?
I have not taken a look see as this year. I did receive several emails on various topics. A lot of good stuff. I mean, there's HD multiplexing and talk about.
Yeah, what is the concept of HD multiplexing?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I got to look it up.
Okay,
I got the emails last
that.
night when I
right.
flew in. I'm like, what is this? And they're talking about the new thing now is offloading, audio services on the cellular networks. There's all kinds of stuff going on. So, things have changed a lot.
Good deal. Yeah, HD multiplexing. That sounds interesting. I want to find out more about that. Hey, folks, if you just tuned in, I'm Kirk Harnack, along here with Chris Tobin. We're at Las Vegas. We're at the Tuscany Hotel and Casino, and that's where the Public Radio Engineering Conference, or PREC, meets a few days before the NAB show. It started this morning. It's going on tomorrow. I got to speak today, and you were in the audience. That was great.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was doing the paparazzi move. I was taking pictures.
That's right. And you're working in public radio, too.
And I'm working in public radio.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, hey, we're going to continue our show in just a few minutes with some details on the Public Radio Engineering Conference. We'll chat about some of those subjects and topics and some things that we learned already this morning. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Zipstream. What's Zipstream? Well, it's a new division of the Telos Alliance. It's a new brand, a new mark of the Telos Alliance. And the Zipstream mark, fits right into the whole world of streaming. Broadcasters have transmitters, but there's a huge audience out there with cell phones. And so broadcasters have got to be on the web. You've got to have a stream, and not just any old stream, not just, oh, yeah, we're there. I mean, a lot of us did that for some years. But now your stream needs to sound good. It needs to have a consistent audio level, consistent audio quality. Not only that, you know, when you have an FM transmitter, you transmit one FM signal. Maybe you've got a translator somewhere else, and that's good. But with streaming, there are so many platforms upon which to receive that you need to transmit your stream in different formats and different bit rates so that any listener is going to be able to listen to it. I'll give you a good example. I bought a television set for my son. It had built-in TuneIn app. So I could go to my TuneIn app, and I use the TuneIn app all the time to listen to my radio stations. Now, I do that on my cell phone, or I do that on my desktop. So now I'm doing it on the TV set. I go to the TuneIn app, I go to my radio station, one of them in Mississippi, try to listen to it, and it says, we're sorry, but this codec is not supported on this platform. Oh my goodness. That TV set didn't have an AAC decoder in it. It only had MP3. Well, I need to stream an MP3 as well, I guess. And you can do that with the ZipStream software or hardware from the Telos Alliance. Let me talk about the ZipStream X2. This is software that runs on a PC, but it's not an app. It runs as a service. And running as a service means that it's going to run very reliably down there, just above the kernel level. It's running there with the drivers and other things, print drivers and network things. So it runs at that kind of level. So it's very well protected. It's not just going to give you a BSOD and be done. It's a service. And the service does your audio processing, your streaming, your metadata ingest and manipulation, mixes all that with the stream, and then puts out streams in the formats that you need. So the ZipStream X2 software, you install it on a PC. For every license that you buy of the ZipStream X2, you get one audio input. Now, from that one input, you can go and process it, make several instances of processing. You can encode it in MP3 at different bit rates, AAC at different bit rates. You can also encode and format in this new Apple HLS scheme for adaptive multi-rate streaming. That is cool. If the listener is on an iOS device or even on an Android, they're going to be hearing the best quality all the time that their connection allows. And if the connection quality goes down and you get a much lower bit rate, guess what? It'll automatically switch to a lower bit rate stream coming via the Apple HLS standard. And that's built in to the ZipStream X2. If you want an option, you can also pay more and get Omnia 9 processing. Now, the ZipStream comes with Omnia 3 processing, and that's perfect for a lot of folks. But if you really want to up the ante, that's a good Las Vegas reference there. If you really want to up the ante, you can get the Omnia 9 processing from Leif Clayson. It's just amazing. And again, it'll stream out to Shoutcast, Icecast, Apple HLS, RTMP for Wowza or Flash. All those standards are built in, and with one license, you can stream to all of them all at the same time, up to the CPU limits of your processor. Check it out. Here's how you do it. Go to telosalliance.com. Look under either the Telos name or the Omnia name for streaming and processing, or stream encoding and processing. And you'll see the ZipStream X2 there. By the way, there are hardware platforms as well. If you're more comfortable with a piece of hardware, then look at the ZipStream R1 or the ZipStream R2. Those are both hardware platforms. Plug them in, configure a few things, plug your audio in, internet out, and off you go. With the software products, you run it on your choice of PC or server, your choice of platforms. It'll even run on XP all the way up to Windows 10. So check that out. TelosAlliance.com. Thanks to ZipStream and the ZipStream X2 software for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. So, Chris Tobin, you've been looking over the PREC schedule, and together we were in there this morning watching a few items. What was the first thing you saw this morning, the first presentation? Oh, this morning we had, what was that? It was, I was saying earlier, Vermont Public Radio. Oh, that's right, yeah. The rebuild, did they say rebuild? They built that, they add an addition to their place. There's a lot of history there. I'm not even going to go into it and do it justice. But very nice approach. The takeaway I have from that is know that you need to pick the right contractors. Yeah. Make sure you... this is for building a radio station. Building a radio station or even adding to it, or they expanded. They added to the building, 27,000 square feet.
get the right people in there so you do it right. Their project, I believe, was $8 million. Well, he said $10 million, but I think $2 million went to programming upgrades, content itself, and the $8 million went to the actual infrastructure, the physical plant. And they learned a lot, discovered a few things. But what they did do is they had a continuity planning committee where they were department heads, I guess you call them, that were involved in the entire process. So if construction, the contractors would 3 weeks out give a schedule of what they're going to do, and the committee would look at it and go, wait a minute, we have a scheduled live interview at that time. The jackhammer on the back wall may not be a good idea, so they would move things around.
Yeah.
Now, you may say, well, is it that easy to do? They were fortunate they were able to get contractors that worked with them. Turns out the contractors they had were the same ones they used 20 years ago in their, I guess when they first moved into their new facility, which was a former barracks for the Vermont State Police.
Except all the workers were 20 years older now.
Oh, yes. Much wiser.
That's right.
So there's only been 3 tenants in the building they're in. It was a cavalry outpost for the U.S. Army in World War I.
Yeah.
Then became a state police barracks, and now Vermont Public Radio.
Oh, okay.
So that was part of the history that you were talking about.
I've been in that building. It's been some years ago, but I remember. Yeah,
it has the radio tower on the side of it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
that radio tower comes from way back.
Our guest who's been on about 2 or 3 times, Rich Parker, used to be in charge of engineering.
That's correct.
He's moved on to Alaska Public Radio.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, it's interesting. You took your takeaway from that discussion was about the planning and the working with the contractors. Yes. Things like that. My takeaway, I was so into the tech. They had an IT department, right? Mm-hmm. IT and engineering, and they had no place to put them for a while, so they moved them across the street. They rented some office space.
Yes.
Across the street, and they used a Ubiquity IP radio. They were so close they had to turn the power all the way down.
Don't you love that?
Yeah.
Sorry, you got too much signal. Really?
You have too much signal. And it gave them almost a gigabit pipe. I think it's an 800 megabit pipe.
Yes.
And so they didn't lose a beat. Their IP phones all worked. Everything worked fine. And I don't think they were doing any AOIP there, but they did all the usual computing stuff, and it was just worked great. And it's just a testament to how well this technology works and how flexible IP is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The trick is planning it, and that's what the takeaway also was from the Vermont Public Radio project was they planned everything out. They thought it out. They made sure. They said, and as he said, we're going to change the power, the utility service into the server room.
Yeah.
It should only take about 15 minutes, the electrician says.
Okay.
But Joe Temicki, I hope I said that right.
Yeah, Temicki.
He's the project. He ran the whole thing. He said, well, what if it doesn't? What if somebody forgets the wrench or something doesn't go right? What do we do? What can we expect? Can you go back on utility? And the electrician was like, not really. So they were renting generators for certain parts of the project where they said, well, what I always call the what if scenario. And that's what they did. So that's why my takeaway from this whole thing was the planning and working that, because that's what always is shortchanged.
Yeah.
The tech is easy to do because you can implement it, put it in, plug it in, and go. But did you plan it? What's it doing? What's it doing for you? How's it going to cover? And one of my questions to him was also, what was your plan for off-site broadcast continuity? Here you are building 27,000 square feet to your facility, still operating your radio facility and the news operations on the other side of the building. Well, they actually are intertwined, and yet you've got jackhammers and pavers, the pounding pavers, the flat in the ground outside.
Yes, yeah.
And I said, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I've worked in situations like this, and there's always something that could go wrong with chemicals. And now with the new federal regulations on work sites and OSHA requirements, certain conditions can occur, and you have to, by law, evacuate the facility.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And that means the occupants of non-construction workers.
Oh.
So, if the radio station staff is there and something happens, even though it may be 600 feet away, the law is vacate the premises because of what could happen. So my question was, what was the planning for off-site broadcast continuity? And he said, across the street in that building where the engineering ops and technology folks went, and they set it up so they could do voiceover, voice tracking, broadcast, a few other things. And he said they did go to it once or twice, and a little bumpy because, of course, you're out of your element. But at least they planned it, and that's what I found nice because I've watched other projects of this ilk take place. I've at conferences and people talk about it, and they always ask, so what was the ups and downs? And invariably, it's always something they could have planned for, but they just overlooked because they thought they could take a cheaper way out. And that's what the other thing he said too is don't spend the money where you see it has to be spent. Don't take the low road and just go
So the next thing this morning, after Joe finished with Vermont Public Radio and the great story about their move and, that, as you said, the planning that had to go into
it was great.
that.
It was a great presentation.
After that, we had 2 sessions. Both of them involved SNMP.
Yes, in 2 different flavors.
Oh.
Well, yeah, if what do you call it? The presentation with Chuck Alexander and Tom Saylor regarding Northwest Public Radio.
Yeah, now what was their challenge there at Northwest Public Radio? They had a bunch of sites.
Well, their challenge, I think, it sounded like it was more of a staffing where they don't have the staffs. They have 27 dozen sites, both TV and radio, and they only got maybe like 5 people to keep an eye on these things.
Okay.
So they relied on the technology or the SNMP technology and the way Burke implements it. So Chuck Alexander talked about the different ways of doing it. It's a distributed method and using IP. And they said, you have to have a fail-safe. Somebody asked, do you have POTS lines as a fail-safe? He said, no. What we've done is we have divergent or multiple carriers for IP.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So if you have several sites and you can bring in 2 or 3 different ways of IP, what it does for you is 2 things. 1, it gives you the fault tolerance you need. But 2, you don't have to change how the user troubleshoots the situation. Think of it. All of us that have Burke remote controls, if you use the ESI interface, the phone interface, you're now doing the phone thing to try and switch something on the transmitter.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in the heat of the moment and you're off the air or something's going wrong,
right,
how fast can you respond on this screen? Whereas if you had an alternate IP link going to that site where IP link 1 died because of the carrier going out, IP link 2 comes into the router, and now you can still use your laptop, still use a smartphone, but you're still familiar with your troubleshooting screens. That was what he was trying to get at.
Okay.
Because he said that when they built their different Burke screens using autopilot and the jet chart, the idea was, we've got 3 dozen sites, and there was all these transmitter monitors. The trick was to make sure that everywhere they looked, if the transmitter TPO was in the left-hand corner, every transmitter box left-hand corner.
Yeah.
If the right-hand corner...
It's kind of human engineering thing here,
It was a human engineering thing,
Yeah.
but also required the technology to follow it up.
Yeah.
So that's what he was getting at. So the session after that was with Davicom ComLab folks.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was John Ahern. And he was talking about the same thing, but in a different flavor, a different approach. But it was SNMP and what you can do. His approach was the more industrial, you get real crazy and go stuff with it. But both approaches make sense and work. It was just how you package it. And they were really good sessions. And that's something people need to consider now. If you're a facility that has minimal staffing, or even if you're not, maybe your facility has great staffing, but you don't want to be taxing the staff on the weekends when they shouldn't have to be. This is where now the new IP technology makes sense. And I think Joe, in the earlier one with Northwest Public Radio, had said they were no longer buying broadcast equipment or any equipment used in the broadcast chain, both TV or radio, that did not have a web or IP-enabled port. So that right there tells you, okay, they've made a decision. We're going to make sure the staff doesn't get taxed. We make sure that when there is an issue, like a lifeguard, they're prepared. Yeah. They're not sitting there running in panic mode every day of the week, and then something really does happen, and they're distracted because they're already in panic mode.
I've not jumped into the SNMP world. We've had a couple shows where we've talked about it here on TWiRT, and we just saw 2 good presentations that involved it. The second presentation, the fellow from Davicom?
Yes.
Yeah. So that helped me to realize one thing. SNMP has this huge tree. It's called a MIB, I believe.
MIB, yes.
Yeah, the MIB. And but it's in many ways, the structure of the MIB is standardized.
That's correct.
Now, individual manufacturers can choose different ways to present the data.
That's right.
Or to accept commands.
Yes.
Right. But because it is so structured, you can use off-the-shelf software that for managing this kind of thing and monitoring that you can talk to anything that has SNMP. But it might involve some what looks to me at first like very complex.
It does, yes.
Programming.
It's definitely a foreboding image when you look at the tree and look at the structure. Go, whoa! And as pointed out by John Ahern, it's designed as a machine-to-machine language.
Yeah.
So our participation in monitoring SNMP was never intended. So yes, it should appear scary. It should appear, whoa, what the devil am I looking at?
Yeah.
That's why you have iReasoning and other programs that are MIB browsers, MIB browsers, not Men in Black. And, it could be because the DOD does do SNMP. Anyway, to do the translation. And that's how you sort of can bring the scale level down a bit. And SNMP, if you talk to your IT department, They probably are doing it already with the servers. It's not uncommon. It's used in data centers all the time. There are different names it goes by, or people have different names for it because they use the product, the browser device, the software that talks to SNMP commands. So they may not call it SNMP; they call it something else. I think he was trying to say that too at one point, because some other folks in the audience were asking questions about MIBs and, well, what if somebody doesn't have this? Or what if you can't get that? And he says, well, you use the browser, they read it, and you understand it. And if you can't get a MIB, then you should call the manufacturer and say, I'm not buying your product because the MIB is a standard that everybody's agreed to.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to give up the information, maybe I shouldn't do business with you.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because both presentations, they talked about that. So obviously, or I should say obviously, apparently, there are some folks out there not giving out this information but want to participate in the game. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to look at if you're a large facility that may need to consider this. If you're a small operation where you don't have the overhead requirements, don't panic. You could look into it, but don't think you have to do it. Because there was a couple of folks in the audience that said, well, we're a small network. I don't have the resources to sit there and program a huge SNMP trapping system. And that's why the Burke product makes sense, because the Burke takes the complexity out and offers you the ability to scale. And that's what Chuck Alexander was trying to get at.
Yeah.
He was trying to say, look, you don't have to. You could do it this way, as he jokingly said. My picture has me in the middle, and this, that, and the other. But his product. The point is, it's scalable, and I know because I've used it. I've done it. The Burke product, in this case, you can use their hardware, the Arc Plus or Arc Plus Touch. But then they have these other boxes, the edge devices, the X Plus 100, the X300 Plus, and others that talk back to the main unit. So if you're a small operation, you can afford to get the Arc Plus brain, I'll call it. But then you can buy the little edge devices to sort of complement your other parts of the facility, talk back, and still control it. And that's what they were getting at. So both presentations, depending on your needs and size, dictates which one you go with.
Sounds like if SNMP is a protocol, it's going to be with us for years to come.
Absolutely.
Then the advancements in technology surrounding SNMP will be advances in the tools that we have to deal with it.
Yes.
It'll only become easier. We'll be able to do more complex things more easily, maybe with a graphical interface or industry-specific things like Burke is doing.
Well, that's it. And SNMP is the Simple Network Management Protocol, so it will be around for a long time. It's how you decide to wrap it. I'll call it that. And as I said, Burke does it in one fashion. Davicom products are really good products. Along with it, Burke and Davicom are equal in a lot of things. It all depends on your application. They both approach it with a very strong, mission-critical design, and it's very specific, and it's great. So you can just pick and choose what you want to do. And I think both presentations were well worth looking at, and I guess they'll become PowerPoint presentations available on the website after the show. But definitely check it out.
So coming up in our next few minutes here, what we want to talk about are what we can expect to happen at NAB over the next few days. Right. Our next TWiRT show next week on Wednesday. So if you're at your calendar, usually TWiRT's on Thursday at 5 Eastern time. Well, that's changing next week only. Next week we'll be on Wednesday at, I believe it's 4:30 Eastern. Or 4:30 here.
4:30 here, 7:30 Eastern.
7:30 Eastern. Yes. That's right. 7:30 Eastern next Wednesday. So watch out. We'll tweet it. Follow us on Facebook. We'll get that information out there. Now, the last thing that I want to chat about before we take a commercial break is this. The last presentation that you and I saw was Mike Dosh talking about more virtualization, more cloud stuff. And he used a great example. He showed all the devices that we use in our radio stations, right?
Right.
Cart machines, turntables, CD players, audio consoles, and even automation systems. And talk about, hey, now in your phone, hold your phone up there, but now in your phone, you've got a compass in your phone.
You got everything
you've got maps in your phone. Things that used to exist in the real world that we used to touch.
Yes.
Right? Now exist in your phone. What was he talking about in terms of virtualizing the stuff that we still have in radio stations?
Well, basically taking what we'll say the hardware, the actual tactile stuff, and converting the same workflow into an application. So he was talking about one of his things was, hey, if you do virtualization and you want to have somebody out on the road contribute to the radio program, traditionally you'd do a mixer setup and everything else, but now you could do it with an app on the phone. Right here I have a Lucy app, and we're all familiar with Lucy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can hear the music. Right now, I'm connected to a radio station in New York City.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yes.
If somebody was listening at the other end, they'd hear me, and I could do a little broadcast.
Right.
This is a virtualization example.
Yeah.
This is where we've gone from a big piece of equipment, a large piece of equipment, mixing and cables and everything else, to now this. And these are the things that you have to rethink, because virtualization in the computer world is very popular. You may be working at your office right now on a computer that's called a thin client. which is actually
a
not
thin client.
Thin client, which is not actually running the application locally where you're sitting.
Yeah.
It's actually running it on a server in a data center somewhere. So you can actually move anywhere you want in the facility and still connect and be doing your work.
Yeah.
That's part of the virtualization process. It's part of reapplying the resources of the computer. The Intel chip, as Catfish pointed out, you have the Pentium 4. If you want to do audio encoding and decoding, you probably use about 90% of its resources. That's just no good.
Right.
So now you move forward to the i3, i5, i7 platform of Intel, and you're lucky you may be taxing it 10% with the same encoding process.
Right.
But now you can encode 10 times as much and still hit maybe 40%.
And you can have lots of other technologies involved in there. So we're broadcasting live at the Tuscany Hotel and Suites this week in Radio Tech. And where our final sponsor is Lavo. Lavo brings you our show every week, this week in Radio Tech. Check out their website. Go to lavo.com, LAWO.com, and check out their website. You'll see the crystal clear audio console there. It's a multi-touch touchscreen interface. It's really awesome. This is part of what Mike Dosh was talking about in his talk, was talking about virtualizing the things that we do. So instead of having your console as a big fixed mechanical piece, you can have your console actually be in a PC. And we're getting to the point where the technology, the touchscreen technology, allows us to actually work and work well. Now, the Crystal Clear consists of two pieces. There's one piece that's a rack mount device, and that's got your audio ins and outs for things that are still in the physical world, like microphones and speakers and other inputs and outputs you may have. It also has a network interface to connect with using Ravenna or AES67 to other devices around the radio station. And you can even take the virtual console, pick it up, and move it to another studio if you like. Move it to another location, elsewhere in the building if you like. You could even go outside the station with that virtual audio console. If you go to the Lavo website, LAWO.com, and you look for the Crystal Clear console, you'll see a video link in the upper right-hand corner. That's Mike Dosh explaining this console idea of the virtual radio console, the Crystal Clear. Check that out. Check out Mike's video. It's about 6 minutes long. He explains how that works. And it's really cool. If you think this technology could work into your facility, I would definitely check it out. Lavo.com, LAWO, and we thank them for being a sponsor of This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris Tobin and I have been broadcasting live from the Tuscany Hotel, Resort and Casino. We're going to sign off now and invite you to watch this coming Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 Eastern Time, just for the one show. It'll be from the NAB. We're going to be live in the Telos Alliance booth. Chris Tobin is going to be live in another booth, so that's going to be kind of cool. We'll do a two-way broadcast there, and we'll have lots of guests, one after another, at the Telos Alliance booth. Also want you to encourage you to, if you're not already a friend of Telos Alliance on Facebook, please do that, or follow Telos Alliance on Twitter. You'll get updates about all the things that are going on at NAB. We'll keep you updated on that. So Chris and I have been broadcasting live here from the Tuscany Hotel and Casino on Flamingo here in Las Vegas. The PREC is still going on here. We'll be going on tomorrow. Chris, we'll wrap it up now, and we'll say goodbye, and we will be back then this coming Wednesday.
Yes, it won't be at this location.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.